Sonya earned a Bachelor of Science degree in education, teaching of individuals with specific learning disabilities, and a master degree in education, teaching master degree of education and teaching of individuals with multiple disabilities. She holds certifications in psychometry, and instructional leadership. I had to look that one up on how to pronounce it, and I still goofed it up. So thank you for agreeing to do this. We're so glad you're here. There are so many people that need to know how to be an advocate, and I think you're just the person to share that knowledge with them. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Donna. I appreciate the invite and appreciate everybody being here because I know that it's a busy time of the year, and you know, kids, school, work. But what I want to do tonight is I really just want to tell a story of the past 10 years and what is going on in Alabama. And I know I saw the list of people who are on there. Some of the people who are on here lived through this with me. So I think that's great. Is there chat, Donna?
There is?
Okay. So if there's anybody has a comment, please feel free, you know, to put it in there.
Yep.
But I'm going to tell you just a little bit about me. I'm going to be your chauffeur tonight because we're going on a journey. I am the Associate Policy Director for Early Literacy at Excel and Ed. Excel and Ed is a policy organization that was started by Governor Jeb Bush out of Florida. And we work, the arm that I work with is we look at policy, we determine if it's strong. We have early literacy model policies. And then we also have an arm that does advocacy. So you're going to hear more about that during the as we go on, because you know I believe our steps are ordered, and that sometimes there's just a bigger plan than what we even know about. Certifications, as she said, in several things, and I'm a professional volunteer also. Members of all of those committees. And, you know, I got to thinking about this. And one of the things when you get put on a statewide committee, you're like, oh, you just feel so honored. Like, wow, this is fabulous. You know, oh, the excitement, our first meeting. And then you start feeling like maybe this wasn't the best idea that you've had. And then sometimes you end up right there. So, those committees are, and they do wonderful work, but they are a lot of work. Disclaimer, this is not legal advice. I am not a lobbyist, or I am just I'm just Sonya. My background is special education. You're going to hear more about that, and you're going to hear more about the some of the potholes that were in the road because of that. You know, what works for me may not work for another. And it wasn't easy. So if you're going to go on this journey, you need to make sure you have your seatbelt on, because it is a rough ride most of the time. So to survive the journey and impact change, you have to have your starting line. Where are you starting? And then you have to go to driving school, because even though we think we know the answers, we don't always know, because the road is long and winding, and you got to make sure you have the right people on the bus. And something else that we found out during this process is you can't always trust your GPS. You think you have arrived, and unfortunately you haven't. So my background, I came from a small town where a traffic jam is literally 4 cars behind a tractor. There's no red lights. So I never would have dreamed in my entire life of getting involved in education policy. So my starting line was way back. Special education teacher, you know, in the hierarchy of special ed teachers, you know, of teachers, special ed is probably down towards the bottom. I didn't have any idea what I was doing. I just knew somebody needed to do something. And I repeatedly was told, it's not my place. Sonya, it's not your place to do that. Sonya, it's not your place to talk to your state board members. Sonya, it's not your place to contact a legislator. And also that I was too passionate because, you know, maybe, I guess it's wrong to want to teach kids to read, but I say educate patiently. You got to make sure that you're telling people about it, advocate passionately, and inspire consistently. So as I started out, as I said, I didn't have a little red Corvette or anything like that. I feel like that I started out in a jalopy. You got to make sure that you pack for the journey. You got to make sure that you've packed your integrity, because this is all about students. If it's not about students, then we shouldn't be doing it. You have to stay true to your beliefs, what you know, that you know, that you know. You have to resist the urge to cast blame, because many times during this journey, you know, all of us that's been on the journey, we could have thrown people under the bus. We chose not to. So always allow people to save face, because it's not about that they were doing it wrong. It's they didn't know. You have to have courage. You are going to fight giants that you didn't even know existed. You just have to make sure you get up every time that you fall. Actually, one of my friends that has served on the literacy task force with me said that I was like one of those clowns, those Bop It clowns that you could knock it over and it just pop right back up. So, and then you got to have determination, and because you can't give up. And even when I thought that none of us, we couldn't go on, we couldn't do anymore, we were able to. So sometimes the path forward is just not clear. I feel like as I get older, the worse I am about this, being able to make decisions. Do I do this? Do I do this? Do I do this? Because there's not a lot of road signs out there when you get started with this. And our cars that we start with, they're not always in the best shape. So my goal in it was to get there alive. Sometimes it was just to survive and to make it through. Because what we know is that we're continuing to call an ambulance for our students when we have caused the damage to them. And so we send kids out in a car with no wheels, or a car that we've patched up, rather than fixing the problem. And there were many times during it, even today, that I was, Jesus, take the wheel. Because the road's already paved. It's not something new. Someone didn't come out 10 years ago and just start talking about this is how kids learn to read. The structured literacy has been there. The reading rope, even I learned about that when I was in college. You want to make sure that you always take the high road. Make sure children you're focusing on. Your conversation has to say, but what's best for kids? And remember that teachers, not programs or products, teach children to read. You have to make sure the relationships, that you're focusing on people and you're building those relationships. Goal is to empower teachers with best practices. And this one has become more important to me over the past couple of years, is allow people to keep their dignity. It's not about showing that this person's wrong. Sometimes the fight really is you just standing firm for what is right, rather than coming out swinging all the time, because in the science of reading, we tend to do that sometimes. So you promote best practices. You don't bash what you hate. And celebrate small wins, because in the beginning, that's all you're going to get is small wins, most likely. And the personal stories, what I found during this is it was the personal stories that got people their attention. And I'm going to share one with you in just a few minutes that has been, it's my why, one of the reasons why I do this. So I found out I wasn't prepared. Special ed background, I could write you an IEP, I could keep you out of court, I could handle behavior problems, write behavior plans, but I had no idea how to teach reading at all. So that was one of the things. Had to go to driving school. So I started the dyslexia therapy training in 2011, completed in 2013, sat for the exam, and now I'm a CALT. Best training, best thing I've ever done. you know, that you always think back that there's these moments in life, those pivot points, turning points. And that was one for me. It was just like, why has no one ever told me this before? So that long and winding road, the advocacy work in Alabama, I actually was trained in dyslexia back in 2001. And however, we went through that phase where Alabama doesn't do dyslexia. We don't serve dyslexic students in Alabama. So even though I had knowledge of it, I was not allowed to use the word. We were not allowed, we were told, don't say it, don't use it. We don't serve dyslexic students in the state of Alabama. So the dyslexia advocates met with the State Department in 2008. They still have the notes from it. Because I'm going to tell y'all, if y'all never dealt with dyslexia mamas, they're a tough bunch. They get stuff done. And what we kept hearing is the same stories year after year. My child can't read, the school won't help them. Parents begging for help for their children. And they still are, because we all had the wait to fail model. We cannot wait until 3rd grade, until a child is in the lowest 20 percentile to screen a child for the characteristics of dyslexia. That's a wait to fail model. We'd have to catch them when they come in immediately in kindergarten. So when I was able to do the dyslexia therapy, that last bullet, students had to arrive to school early because they could not miss morning work. So 3 days a week, my kids got there at 7:15. School started at 8. Got there at 7:15. We did our dyslexia therapy lesson, and then they had to be back in their classroom to do their morning work that they couldn't read. So, you know, that was that thing, is that I felt like we were going in circles over and over and over again. This works. We know it does. Why won't you let us do it? And, you know, those roundabouts that sometimes confuse me, I think that we just kept circling it. We knew what was going on and we knew what to do, but we didn't know how to get off that roundabout. And so one of the things we want to make sure we do is we don't become roadkill. Oh, that was cute. Got to go back.
I can't hear it.
I don't know how to fix that. So the video that, I know you couldn't hear all the screaming that was going on, but you know, I think you got the idea that you're going to have cars coming at you very quickly, and there's going to be some screaming, and there's going to be some dodging, because there were many times during this that I felt like we were standing out in the middle of a super highway with cars coming straight at us. But in 2015, one of the things that the dyslexia advocates in the state did is they made contact with our state board members. And I think some of our state board members are on here. And I'm going to tell you, I don't know how anyone's state is set up, the hierarchy of the organization, but state board members, that was who we focused on. And talking about moving mountains, we moved mountains with that. They did the dyslexia amendments to the Alabama Administrative Code. And one of the former board members said, this is the best work that we've ever done. And I'm going to tell you, I was there in the audience. We were there as all the negotiations went on. And it was because we got what we wanted. We thought that all students in the state were going to be served. They were going to be screened. So we had definitions. We had teacher training and professional development, dyslexia screening, because our administrative code says K-12, dyslexia services while in general ed, parent rights, dyslexia advisory council was set up, and the dyslexia resource guide. So you would think, wow, that is great, but you know that it never works that way. Because life's a highway. We thought we were going to take it easy, because why wouldn't people want to do what was best for their students? Why wouldn't they want to teach them to read? Why wouldn't they want them to give them what they needed. And so we got a lot of "that's not my job," and some crossing guards of "stop, don't go there, well, we're doing that," and we really weren't. So we had to take up defensive driving, and we just went out in the state and started sharing the message. We made sure we went to board meetings. We had dyslexia proclamations in towns. We were on TV. My friend Krista Sims was in the newspaper. My friend Krista Aiken has the towers lit up, the retirement towers lit up every year. And that's the Dyslexia Advisory Council. So we had to learn to navigate around and to take some detours that we really didn't want to, and honestly was just a waste of time. But sometimes you just do what you have to get there. But we were on a road to nowhere because it was an unfunded mandate. It wasn't, schools weren't being told you had to. We were told that the Alabama Administrative Code was the Bible for schools, and not so much. So that road to nowhere, we just didn't feel like we were getting anywhere. The parents had the same complaints. Those of us who had dyslexia training, we weren't getting to do our jobs. And one of the things that we found is that the road narrows, when it gets, as it gets closer to something important sometimes. There's not like the big high road freeway with 8 lanes. Sometimes it's just a 1-lane road, and you have to focus on what's right there directly in front of you. So that's what many of us did. And I'm going to tell you a story about one of mine, because I had a student that I was told to stop beating your head against a wall. You'll never teach him to read. And if anyone knows me, that was a slap in my face, and I thought, I'll teach him to read or die. And I kept getting, even after the administrative code, we don't do dyslexia. We don't have resources for dyslexia. And, one of the things is that, we've all heard probably the starfish story, but I can't help them all, but I can help one. And that's what I focused on. And this is my why. This is Luke Ben. I first met Luke Ben and his parents when he was in 1st grade. And at that time, we were under the don't do dyslexia rule in Alabama. So they took him to Florida and got a diagnosis of convergence insufficiency. And he was one of the students that had to come early because they wouldn't allow us to do it during the day. After that, he had difficulty holding his pencil. He couldn't read the word bit, mixed his letters up. So we started dyslexia therapy with him. And he was one of the things I think that changed the culture of the school that I was in, because all of a sudden he scored on grade level on one of their tests. And it was just like, they were shocked. It was like, what are you doing? Because, he worked hard. He really, really did. But what got me is that middle picture. Was one day I was with a friend. We walked into Barnes and Noble. And this is the kid that I was told would never learn to read. And he was doing something with his football team. He had the football team was volunteering to read books to kids that day. And I walked in and his parents saw me, and they were like, "We're so glad you came to see him. Can you believe he's doing this?" I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And I walked around a corner, and there he sat reading a book to a student. And so I hope what you're getting out of that is that it's not impossible, and you have to stay focused. And maybe you can't start with the whole entire state, but you can start with one, because that story has changed. It changed the school, changed his parents, changed everyone who found out about it, because they really thought he was never going to learn to read. So every once in a while, though, we had to have a tune-up. And in 2017, Julia Wall and I were put on the Strategic Reading Committee. And I know there were others on there too, but this kind of helped guide us towards where we go. I see you, Julia. But it helped guide us towards where we needed to go, because I'm going to tell you that report was fabulous. It really was. It was fabulous. That was the foundation of the Alabama Literacy Act, but it was hidden. You know, it wasn't on the website. It wasn't anything, you know, put out. It had teacher training. It had retention in second grade. We're not going to be promoted from second grade if you cannot read, and had a lot of great things in there. And you know, if we would have implemented that in 2017, I'm just wonder, you know, how much different life would be. But we worked really hard on that. Like I said, it was just buried. But during that time, we had Dr. Kevin Smith and Laurie Lee from REL out of the Florida Center for Reading Research came in and gave us some information from Mississippi. And I know that everybody probably in the nation's always said, thank God for Mississippi. And it's always because they scored lower than us. And when they showed us this information, this data, it blew my mind, because I immediately wanted to know, what is it that they're doing? Because for their students in grade 3, those are percentage points. They raised their Black 10.45 percentage points. I mean, that is huge. And it wasn't just in grade 3, like they dropped everything. Look at all the way down, grade 3, 4, and 5. Those kids who have free or reduced lunch. That's sometimes we feel like they're impossible to move. Look at there in 5th grade, 11.65. Those, I immediately, I want to know what they're doing. And they started telling us some of it. But I also was like, I'm going to Jackson, Mississippi. I want to know what we want to know. We want to go. We want to hear from them and hear it for ourselves. So we came up with a plan. And as everybody knows me, sometimes those plans don't always work out the way that we wanted them to. And sometimes I felt like it was Thelma and Louise instead of Lucy and Ethel, but we made it. We just got on the road and kept going. And we got the right people on the bus. Because of our connection with the state board, we were put in touch with Nick Moore, who was Governor Ivey's education policy advisor at that time. And he listened and he helped organize a trip to Mississippi. And not everyone who was invited went, but the right people went. So first of all, he invited legislators, Representative Terry Collins and Alan Baker, and they were the sponsors of the Alabama Literacy Act, and they got to hear all of this. The State Department in Mississippi had their whole team there. And this was in 2018. This is before their big jump in 2019 on the NAEP. But it was as though they talked as one. It amazed me. They could finish each other's sentences because everyone there knew what was going on and they knew what to do. And the team is the last picture there on the right, but that middle picture is the one that, talking about steps being ordered, that the one in blue, Dr. Kimiana Burke is now my boss at ExcelinEd. And so there's been some connections here that have gotten us, you know, to a place that that's impacted change for more than just the student sitting in front of us. This was their implementing Mississippi strategic plan for literacy. Like I said, they gave us everything, y'all. They have paved the road. They had lines on the road. And they gave us copies of everything. It was here, take it, make it your own, put your name on it. We don't care. It's all about students. Unfortunately, some of those that were there we already do that. We've done that. We've done that and it doesn't work. And but thank goodness that the influence of everyone else who believed it could work outweighed that. Because what we know is we're never going to teach all of our students to read if we don't teach our students who have the greatest difficulties. And that's what the Mississippi story they talk about, is they went out after their lowest performing students. They went after their Black and brown students. They went after their students who were on free and reduced lunch. And that's where they're focused. And that's how they started raising their scores, because you can't get to 100% without going through the bottom 20%. You know, Kareem Weaver says that if your literacy program is not structured to get the most number of kids to the top or to the level of society, there's no equity. There can be no equity, no social justice without literacy. And I think that we all agree with that, because it's a social justice issue. It's an equity issue. Because we've known about this. This book was published in 1955. I can't do the math, but it was a long time ago. And y'all, it was Why Johnny Can't Read and What You Can't Do About It. And it was how he taught his neighbor's son to read. The child was 12 years old, couldn't read, and he used phonics. And you know, it's all, hindsight's always 20/20, but you know what they handed us? They handed the nation a little red Corvette. They handed, here, this is what you do, this is how you do it. But obviously we didn't like Corvettes, because in 1983, he published again, Why Johnny Still Can't Read. I love this part, a new look at the scandal of our schools. And so realized that we didn't like that Corvette, so he gave us the Mustang. And we still had difficulty doing what was needed to be done. It was like people would read the book, but it didn't change behaviors. So in my opinion, I guess we just didn't like red cars, is all I know. Because we know why Johnny couldn't read. Because we didn't use the information, we didn't use the research. We're still using strategies that reflect our own biases. We're still using things that we've always done. We're still saying, you know, it's okay. Well, 30% of our students are proficient and 70 are not. And we don't worry about it, because we just accept it and move on sometimes. And one of the things that really struck us, and about Mississippi, and then we pulled it on over into Alabama, is that there was not a lot of accountability. You know, nobody got arrested when Johnny couldn't read. I thought that little car was cute, but you know, there just wasn't accountability when our students couldn't read, because we kept looking at students as the problem. And the students are not the problem. You always need to assume that the problem was with the instruction or the assessment until proving otherwise. So many times that I've heard, there's something wrong with him. There's something wrong with him. There's something wrong with them. Well, they can't do it. Well, they're not paying attention. Well, they need to read at home. And really, we need to look, we're the teachers, and we need to make sure that we're looking at our behaviors. So we started following the map. Governor Ivey started an executive committee on grade level reading, made sure they got a lot of right people on the bus. And again, here comes Excel and Ed. Carrie Miller, who was then the director of early literacy, she helped write the Alabama Literacy Act. So that's two connections right there already. And I did a dyslexia simulation for the House Education Committee. And y'all, that was, I felt like it was very powerful, because, you know, they felt like, well, you know, a third grader that you can't read. What I did also liked is that I was able to look at them and say, don't cheat, you're cheating, stop, don't lie. And, but the other thing that came from the trip to Mississippi was the letters training. One person who went worked for the Department of Early Childhood. And she came back and she said, I want to do letters training. So Alabama started letters training in 2018. Unfortunately, our reading coaches were not in that first cohort, because they already had their training planned out for the year. So some people got ahead of them in that training. What we didn't realize is we just put ourselves on the highway to the danger zone. I mean, because that road just got longer and longer sometimes, and more dangerous and more dangerous. And there were potholes everywhere, and it was very difficult to dodge them. You know, in a perfect world, if we could go back and change things, we could have those reading coaches go first in that cohort, but we didn't. So we had to find a way to navigate around it. So we started doing, this is one of my favorite parts, we started running amok. And that's literally what it was said. There's those Dyslexia Advisory Council members running amok. And so I've always stuck with that one because I thought it was hilarious. Because what we were doing is we were advocating for students. We were saying these kids can't read. We know what to do. And it was handed over to us on a silver platter. So there was some backlash on all of that. And in 2018, in December, it was a dark day for dyslexia in Alabama because the Dyslexia Advisory Council was fired from a volunteer position. We were told we were no longer needed, that thank you very much. And they didn't need our input anymore. They were going to start another Dyslexia Advisory Council. And all of those connections that we had made before that came in really handy about that time, because before we left the building, we were on our phones. Because the Alabama Dyslexia Advisory Council is in our administrative code. So they couldn't just disband us. We had to stay there together. And then we started getting from the state level, here we go again, it's not, nor never should be one or the other, rather all or both. And that was someone who was very balanced literacy and believed in, children learning when they play, learning by osmosis, I call it. And so talk about getting the right people on the bus. But then we had a representative in our state who stood up when Representative Collins was talking and said, there's no such thing as dyslexia. And I thought to myself, if we could only have you sit and watch a struggling student read, might change your mind on that one. But even though they told us it was impossible, we built a new bridge. We built a new bridge from the dyslexia amendments to the administrative code to the Alabama Literacy Act, because the Alabama Literacy Act put those amendments into law. And even though I was told repeatedly, Sonya, that will never pass, you never get a bill like that through on the first time, I just kept believing and saying, well, why not? Well, why can't we? Well, I think it's going to be fine. We were on phones to state board members. We were on phones to our legislators. We were on the phone with everybody. We were all over social media. We were sending out emails because we saw this as a chance to impact the lives of our students. And that's why we're educators. So this bill that they told me would never pass was adopted by our House. Yes, 90, no, 3, and 2 abstained. And in our Senate, 26-0. I don't know that you've ever been to or watched the Senate meeting, especially. That doesn't happen very often, especially with a bill that was this large and was going to bring so much change for our state. So on June 10th, Governor Ivey signed the Alabama Literacy Act, and there's students there with her. And the Alabama Literacy Act it's very explicit. And we're going to talk about that just a little bit, but it's very explicit about what you have to do, because we were working at that time with people who had been on the bus a very long time, and they didn't believe, they kept saying, well, we've always done it this way. Well, balanced literacy, they need a little bit of everything. And so I think our law had to be more explicit because of what we were dealing with. Not every state's law has to be that way. In Mississippi, this was led from the top down. It started in their State Department rather than in the, from the bottom up. And I think it makes a difference. Because when that was signed, I'm not gonna lie, I felt like I literally was standing on a corner in Winslow, Arizona. I celebrated. Everybody in my family watched it, that last vote on my computer with me. I cried, cheered, because it was like, yes, we've got this. But what we know is that you can have something great on paper, but the implementation of it and the follow through is so important. And in the beginning, we made some mistakes. We made, I can't make that go back. We had some issues with just getting the literacy task force started, just getting our committee on grade level reading started. And however, again, Excel and Ed's going to come up. I was invited because of Representative Terry Collins to Excel and Ed Summit that year in San Diego, where I met this group of people there, and they were all State Department leaders. And I think that at that time there were about 20 something states involved in it. But that was kind of life-changing for me, because you got to hear what everybody else was going through and all the things that they were doing to try to make it work, and also able to just brainstorm with them. That's the team that went. But I also met someone that has just been very special to me there. She's the far left one, Dr. Maria Murray from the Reading League. And if you have not met her, sweetest person. And they're doing great work at the Reading League, but they presented to us that day, and they made me believe that what we were doing, what we wanted to do, was possible. What our law said to do, that it was possible to get to 100%. It was possible to have 95% of our students proficient. And so that was just very inspiring for me. And that was just another summit where we got to go, and it was fabulous, because y'all, honestly, after seeing the principles that are put out, the fundamental principles, what a comprehensive literacy policy needs to have. We've got our license, our tag, and our registration, and we're ready to go, because we had 16 out of their 17. Now, that eliminating 3 queuing has been added since we first wrote our law. But we had the science of reading training. We had letters training. Unfortunately, in Alabama, it's optional. It's not required. So that means teachers sometimes start it and don't finish it. But we also have, Alabama has shaped the nation with reading coaches. And we have our local reading coaches, we have our regional, and then we have our leadership specialists. But also aligning that teacher prep program, because we've put Band-Aids on things for so long, and our goal was to stop the bleed. We had to, or prevent it. And we can't do it without that. And the other thing is, our state board made sure that the assessment, the licensure test, was aligned to the science of reading. And so that we teach to test. So Alabama changed to the foundations of reading. I think it goes into effect this year. And that was very important, because then schools had to change what they were teaching. We got funding. The funding for this current school year was $93.1 million. And back before this, it was like $45 million. So assessments, universal screener, dyslexia screener, notifying parents, required district adoption of high quality instructional materials. And so we had all of those things, thought that we were in good shape. Our law is, as I said, very explicit, because we read over policy at Excel and Ed from many states. And not all of them are as explicit in this area, because our goal was to be preventative. If we can prevent a child from struggling later on in life, we want to prevent it from the beginning. And one thing is that we know is that letter naming fluency and phonemic awareness are the 2 best predictors of future reading success. And we weren't assessing them. We weren't looking at that. We were putting them on a computer-based adaptive program. And we weren't looking at, can this child read? Does this child know the letters of the alphabet? And that still goes back to that wait to fail model, because we want to screen for those skills that are so important, those critical prerequisite skills immediately. Alabama also requires that our assessment has encoding or spelling, and that one is a game changer if people know what to do with it. But of course, there were detours, closures, and sinkholes, because the literacy task force did what was required. The literacy task force was required to go through and vet core programs, assessments, interventions. Seems like there was one more. And create the portfolio and do essential skills. However, we follow the process, and Alabama's law says that students in K-3, if they're struggling, if they have a reading deficit, will be put into a dyslexia-specific intervention. And the ones that were recommended by the Literacy Task Force, they're on the left. That list has changed, but if you see, everybody who submitted was put on the list. And so that set us back, because schools who were using some of those that were not approved, didn't meet the requirements of our act, then they continued to use those. And it's not that those programs are terrible, because there's no one size fits all, but according to our law, only the 4 on the left side met the requirements. So, with knowing that we've got all these things going on, again, we should have been in our little red Corvette, going down the highway. But we weren't. And anybody who knows me knows that I can't drive 55. I'm not one of those people that can drive 55. I know it's the speed limit, but I'm always in a hurry. And while we didn't have another year with some of these kids. People kept saying, well, we'll do it next year. Well, we've got to do this. We didn't have another year with some of these kids. It was this year or else. And I'm going to tell you, you can't always trust that GPS, because we thought, again, we were going in the right, going the right way, the right direction. Doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes your GPS takes you and you end up in the middle of a field somewhere. Or you drive that Chevy to the levee and it's not dry, it's full of water. And I think that, this happened a couple of times in the past 4 years of the implementing of the Alabama Literacy Act. But there's hope. Because obstacles do not block your path, they shape your ride. The picture behind that, we had a delay because, only Alabama would implement such a comprehensive literacy law right before a pandemic hit. And so it was voted, instead of like most states, it was voted to be delayed for 2 years. And I think we saw the results of that this year on the ACAP test, where students were, their scores had actually dropped. And, we had to expect delays on that long and winding road. However, we know that it works because our NAEP achievement scores improved. We didn't drop like the rest of the nation. The rest of the nation, some states dropped like 9 points, and we actually went up 1 point. We went from a 212 to a 213. And that was before the Literacy Act was delayed. So we made sure that those students were getting what they needed. Some district level, this actually came out of Madison County. My mind went blank for a minute. And look at the difference in their data there. Look at the kindergarten decoding. Pre-COVID, 36, and then 78. I mean, that's a huge difference. And what they were doing is they were following the Alabama Literacy Act. They were using all of the Literacy Task Force recommended assessments, interventions, core curriculums, and they were seeing the results of it. But this one gets me, is because this is a child who mom has fought for years to get help for her child. And her child's biggest accomplishment this year in 4th grade has been sequencing the alphabet. She was in 4th grade. She got to 4th grade and couldn't put the letters of the alphabet together. And that's why we have to make sure that we don't stop, because the journey's really never over. You can have the best law, most explicit law, and but you have to stay on top of things. Because one of the things is, I always say, well, you can't stop believing. You have to believe, and that you just have to keep going, because there's going to be naysayers. There's going to be people that put obstacles in your path. You're going to have to dodge around. But my other one is that, but I stand my ground and I won't back down. And I think that's part of my personality, is if I know that I'm right, I know that I know that I know that I'm right, then I find it very difficult to back down. So that's one of the mindsets you have to use. It's not about fighting, it's about standing, and it's about standing for our students. Just a couple of final thoughts. Advocates are not always the most popular people in the room. You're going to make enemies. You're going to be called many names that we won't share right now. And lots of things are going to be said about you, because I'll never be remembered as a woman who kept her mouth shut. And I'm okay with that, because of the lives that are changed. We struggled, and there were many times it would have been easier to just quit and walk away. But we persisted, because somewhere someone is waiting on you to do what you're called to do. And I think that's one of the things that has impacted Alabama so much, is there was this group of people who linked arms and went forward and just said, we're not stopping until we get, all students reading. You get to go some great places with those, with what you're doing. I've met some amazing people. I've met some of my good friends. Bottom left is Shelley Bell Smith and Cynthia McCarty, and then Maria and I again, and then our group with Mary Dahlgreen, Ken, myself, Shelley, and Julia, and of course Terry and Alan. But that middle one, of course, the top one too, Governor Ivey, because Governor Ivey was the first governor in the nation to have a reception in honor the dyslexia therapists in the state. So we went to the reception, got pictures with her. She gave a speech. It was fabulous. And we also got a pen. That one in the middle goes back to Excel and Ed, because now Kim Yana Burke is my boss. And again, it's about the path that we take. It's about the following what you're supposed to do and standing strong. But you're not standing by yourself. Find your people, build relationships with them, and because you can impact change. I started out, there were 29 people in my graduating class from the little school I graduated from. And very rural area in Winston County, Alabama. And we didn't know about the rest of the world. I couldn't even dream of some of the things that I've gotten to do in life, simply because I was advocating for kids. I was standing for them. So even if you start out way behind, if you get the right people, then you're gonna make a difference. So that is all that I have, Donna. If there's any questions, I think y'all can unmute and ask.
Thank you. I always unmute because I don't want to make noise. Thank you. That was great. Does anyone have any comments or questions for Sonya?
I think most of them a lot of them on here have actually been through it with me, walked through it with me.
So you're all our heroes, right?
Yes, they are.
Mm-hmm.
Sonya, I have a question. This is Ashley Evans.
Mm-hmm.
So I am a classroom teacher
Mm-hmm.
in a rural setting like you're speaking of.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to be very careful.
Yep.
My goal is to get parents to do the speaking
Mhm.
And to get, people from other parts of the state who are comfortable fighting the fight,
Mhm.
to come to board meetings. So I just wondered if you have any advice to a teacher.
Well, as a teacher, because, I started out as a special education teacher, and obstacles were repeatedly put in my path. You don't know what you're talking about. That's not your place. And I found ways around them because it was so important. Again, those relationships, finding like-minded people and linking arms with them made a huge difference. I didn't start this work. This work started in Alabama back in the 1990s. But however, I found out about it, and I wanted to make sure that that we kept moving forward. And there's been some, I know that you worry as a classroom teacher that, there's going to be repercussions for what you say and what you do. And I'm going to tell you, I have lived through some of those and I see my friends down here nodding their heads. I have lived through some of those that, I probably shouldn't have, but I just found other ways to do it. If there are any literacy experts in your state, like national literacy experts, connect with them. Start a reading league in your state. That is, that's very important. Other things, getting to those state board members. Does your state have state board members that have voting power?
So yes, we have just formed, well, I say just formed, it's been in the last year, the Literacy Council in Georgia. And we just had the superintendent from Mississippi to come and speak at our last meeting.
Yes.
So we're heading in the right direction 100%. As a teacher in a rural county though, I feel like there's a movement, but it's more focused in Atlanta right now, maybe even Savannah, but not so much spreading everywhere yet. So, but yes, we have that council. And so it's about, I guess my thing is what I thought the most successful thing that the superintendent for Mississippi shared was that things came from the state.
Yep.
Which can be scary also. Yep. As a teacher, we know that, but they were the ones that monitored it, because so many people can say they're going to control it on a local level, and they are not, they don't have quality control.
Right. We actually helped with Georgia's, we gave feedback on that bill, that policy several times. And I agree with what Dr. Wright said, starting from the top.
Right.
It takes a long time, though, sometimes when you're starting at the top, for it to ever trickle down into a classroom. One of the things that, if they're offering any training, we look at so many, I don't remember right now, but if they're offering any training, I would sign up for it. I would ask. I would say, I want to do this. Are they doing any? I think they're going to have an approved list of professional development, aren't they?
Yeah. So right now their approved list is directed at dyslexia screeners. And yes, that whole curriculum, it's more of a curriculum, a list of approved programs that the state will fund, versus if you don't pick these, you're going to fund them on your own. So, but I have actually I've paid to do my own, I've gone back for IMSE, and they've actually, they're accredited through IDA now. They did some changes to their program. I saw them on your list, but they've also done some modifications, a lot of modifications. And I'm getting on for the Lexia grant that they've got out right now for the letters training.
Oh, yes.
So
So you'll find some like-minded people in that letters training, and you will make some connections, I believe, because that is life-changing for teachers, especially, I'd already had the dyslexia therapy training before that, but I still learned so much from that. And but you'll go through it, with a cohort. And so you'll be able to make some connections and talk to people about what they're doing. But my advice to teachers is always close your door and teach.
Yeah.
What's best for your kids. Just
Right.
close your door and teach. And I used to do that because one time our district was given some a program, and we were told you better follow it to fidelity, even in special education. And they gave me the intervention materials. My kids couldn't read that. So I'm not telling you to do this, I'm just telling you what I did, is that I set those pretty books that they got out on my bookshelf, and I dusted them every once in a while so they wouldn't look dusty. But the stuff I really used was in my cabinet underneath it, because that was not what my kids needed. But now Georgia's moving in the right direction with all of the things that they're doing. Their bill was pretty comprehensive. But close your door and teach, and then find people, make connections, see who your state board members are, and make connections that way, because they can help you so much. And we did it as just we wanted to help them make their decisions. Here's the information. So I think that would help. But it's not, we're 4 years in. Is that right? Are we almost 5 years in? We're almost 5 years in. 4. Nobody's nodding at me. My math people should be nodding at me, but there's still people in our state who don't know. They don't know the requirements. They don't know that, if a child has a reading deficit, they're supposed to have an individual reading plan. And schools are not doing it. The other thing is that, I took the law. I would say the law says this, and we need to do this. So it wasn't my idea. It was the law says this. And you can't argue with facts like that, black and white. So, that was, and sometimes it was just, what are we going to do? This is what the law says. What are we going to do? And sometimes the people in church, they don't know. So then they're gonna give you an opportunity to share with them on it. But I always go back to the law. The law says this, and the legislative intent, because the legislative intent of this comprehensive bill in Alabama was to improve student outcomes.
Right.
And so that's how we always made sure we were reading it, what's best for kids. And especially when you start your letters training. And IMSE, I know that they've made some changes. That's the multisensory part. That's how you deliver the information that the knowledge that you're going to get. But and they're both great. But you're going to have you're going to get some materials, especially in the letters training, that you're going to be able to use to share with other teachers in your school, to share with administrators. I think that will help some of your advocacy efforts.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Anybody else?
Donna's done a great job advocating for years too. Do you have any advice for Ashley?
Well, we started out by finding an advocate in the legislatures. You gotta find someone who understands what's going on. Typically, it's someone who has or knows someone who has dyslexia, and so they understand the struggles. But this isn't really just a dyslexia problem. This is just in general education problem. But you have to find someone who's compassionate and understands that our kids are in trouble, and what can we do about it? So that's where you start. And then you just start knocking on doors. And, fortunately, there's some really good legislation out there that you don't have to create the wheel anymore. It's already there. You just pull from different states and put it together. We had extreme opposition from our state reading association. They were the biggest barrier for 15 years. And finally, I don't know what happened, a miracle happened, but the legislators just got tired of hearing from them because they knew what they were saying is not true. And fortunately, things turned around for us. And we have a new bill in Wisconsin that was just signed into law, Act 20, in June. So that, that's something that you could take a look at, Ashley, for some ideas. It's not perfect. It has some flaws, but it's extremely comprehensive.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I muted myself, sorry. Georgia's bill is pretty comprehensive. I mean, there's no such thing as perfect. We know that. The key sometimes is getting ahead of the loopholes that are in there, because most states are local control. And so, state departments will say, well, we don't want to tell them what to do. Well, the law tells them what to do. So, I would get ahead of it and make sure that, well, we know this is what's best for kids because of this. We know that, we know what assessment, we know what skills we should be assessing. We know that our intervention should be skills based, not just everybody who's in red on a test get the same thing. We know all of that. So that was one of the things, is that I would say, we know this. We know this, when really probably the person I was talking to didn't know.
Right.
But if you say we, you're building that relationship, and that really helped. So yeah, George, it's going to take them, but they are working on it. I do know that, because they're in part of our early literacy network, and we send them resources all the time, but it's a good, it's a good law. It's just going to take a little bit. It's going to take people like you in the classroom who just stand and say, this is what's best for kids.
Right. And it's not about us.
And it's not about you.
Right.
It
That's
takes
right.
a long time. It takes a long, I would say, we've been working on this probably 20 years. I mean, it's a long time.
Hey, Donna, would you turn the recording off?
Sure.
Oh, that's good.
My